The laughter felt like a currency, minted in the warm September air and spent freely across the manicured lawns of my Connecticut estate. Crystal flutes chimed, a gentle counterpoint to the string quartet playing Vivaldi on the veranda. It was a perfect scene, meticulously crafted, much like the artisanal furniture that had built this house and the $23 million fortune I was now meant to be enjoying. My retirement party. The final, gilded chapter of the Evelyn Redd story. Or so they thought. From my seat of honor, a hand-carved walnut throne of my own design, I watched them all. My friends, my former board members, the sycophants who smelled money like sharks smell blood. And my family. My heart, a well-guarded fortress for 72 years, always left the portcullis down for them. There was my son, Daniel, his smile as easy and charming as it had been when he was a boy. A good man, my Daniel, but soft, like unseasoned wood. He stood with his arm around his wife, Amelia. My daughter-in-law. As flawless as a porcelain doll, with her honey blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon and a dress the color of a summer sky. She was the perfect hostess, the perfect wife, the perfect mother to my granddaughter, Lily. And Lily, my Lily, 9 years old and chasing fireflies near the rose bushes, her laughter the only sound that truly mattered in the world. She was the anchor of my heart. Daniel raised his glass, quieting the crowd. To my mother, he began, his voice thick with emotion. A titan of industry, a true visionary, but to me, always just Mom. She taught me everything about integrity, about strength. Now, it's her time to rest. We're all so proud. To Evelyn Reed. A chorus of "To Evelyn" echoed as glasses were raised. I felt a swell of genuine pride, a warmth that had nothing to do with the vintage champagne. I stood up, my own glass in hand, ready to deliver a speech I'd rehearsed in my head, a few words of gratitude, a touch of humor, a graceful exit. I smiled at Daniel, then let my gaze drift to Amelia, who was beaming beside him. And that's when I saw it. It was nothing. A flicker of movement, a gesture so swift and economical it was designed to be invisible. As I turned my head to acknowledge a guest, Amelia's back was mostly to me. Her left hand, the one holding her clutch, came up to her right. For a fraction of a second, I saw her thumb press the clasp, her fingers dip inside. A sleight of hand worthy of a professional magician. Then, as she turned back towards the small table beside me where my champagne flute sat, her hand shielded my glass from view. I saw the tilt of her wrist. I saw a faint, almost imperceptible dusting of white powder fall from her pinched fingers into the golden, bubbling liquid. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. The warmth in my chest turned to ice. The world didn't stop. The quartet didn't miss a note. The laughter didn't cease. But for me, the air had been sucked out of the evening. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Every instinct honed over 50 years of negotiating hostile takeovers and reading the subtle tells of liars screamed at me. I had just witnessed an act of aggression as deliberate and cold as a declaration of war. My mind, my greatest asset, began to work not in a panic, but with a chilling, surgical clarity. What was it? Poison? Unlikely. Too messy, too public. She wouldn't risk that. It had to be something else. Something that would mimic a natural catastrophe of old age. A stroke. A heart attack. A sudden, terrifying plunge into dementia. Something that would render me helpless, incompetent. Incapable of managing my own affairs. Incapable of controlling $23 million. My speech died on my lips. I needed a new script. "Oh, how clumsy of me," I said, my voice as light and airy as I could make it. I gestured towards the table. I think a bit of lint fell into my glass. I smiled sweetly at Amelia, whose own smile was a mask of placid perfection. "Amelia, darling, could you be a dear and pass me a napkin from that tray?" I pointed to a waiter who was weaving through the crowd. It was the perfect distraction. As Amelia turned, Her focus shifting for just 2 seconds, my hand moved. It was not the trembling hand of a septuagenarian. It was the steady, decisive hand of the woman who had built an empire from a garage workshop. The waiter passed close by. My hand, wrinkled but sure, intercepted a fresh, full glass of champagne from his silver tray. In the same fluid, economical motion, I placed my own tainted glass onto the now empty spot. It was a perfect exchange. No one noticed. The waiter moved on, oblivious. When Amelia turned back with the napkin, I was holding the new, clean glass. "Thank you, my dear," I said, my smile never wavering. I dabbed the rim of the glass for show. Now, where was I? I raised my flute. "To my family," I said, my voice resonating with a new, steely undertone that only I could understand. "To legacy. To the future, and to the trust that binds us all together." My eyes found Amelia's and I held her gaze. "To family." I watched as she raised her own glass to her lips. The glass that had been intended for me. She took a delicate, confident sip. I waited. 1 second. 2. 10. Nothing happened. Her face didn't contort in pain. She didn't clutch her chest. She simply lowered her glass, her perfect smile still in place. But I saw it. A flicker of confusion in her eyes. A subtle tightening of her jaw as she looked from her glass to me, a silent, frantic question in her gaze. Why was I still standing? Why was I still lucid, smiling, in perfect control? Her smile became brittle, the porcelain showing its cracks. In that moment, I knew. The war was undeclared, the weapon was invisible, and the battlefield was my own life. They didn't want me dead. They wanted me erased. The champagne in my hand was cold, but not as cold as the certainty settling in my soul. My retirement had just ended. My real work had just begun. The last pair of taillights, a receding red glare, disappeared down my long, gravel driveway. The sound of the engine faded, swallowed by the chirping of crickets. And then, silence. A profound, ringing silence that the Vivaldi and laughter had only been holding at bay. Daniel had been fluttery with concern. "Are you sure you're all right, Mom? You look pale." He'd fussed over me while Amelia leaned against the doorframe, one hand pressed to her temple. "It's just a migraine, Danny," she'd murmured, her voice tight. The stress of the party. Her eyes, when they met mine, were dark pools of confusion and simmering frustration. The performance was for Daniel, but the look was for me. "What did you do?" it seemed to ask. Why didn't it work? I had played my part. The gracefully aging matriarch, weary after a long evening. "I'm just tired, darling. It was a wonderful party, but it's past my bedtime." I kissed Lily's forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of soap and grass stains. She was already half asleep in Daniel's arms. Sweet dreams, my little firefly. Protecting that innocence was now the only mission that mattered. As Daniel helped a wobbly Amelia into the car, he called back, "We'll call you in the morning, Mom. Get some rest." Now, alone, I walked back into the great room. The house, which had felt so vibrant and alive an hour ago, was a mausoleum of a finished celebration. Half-empty glasses sat like forgotten promises on every surface. A single, crushed canopy lay on the Aubusson rug. The air was thick with the ghost of expensive perfume and the cloying, sweet smell of wilting lilies in their vases. I stood in the center of the room, my hand resting on the back of my walnut throne. I replayed the moment. The glint of her clutch. The pinch of her fingers. The whisper-faint fall of powder. It was burned into my memory with the clarity of a flashbulb. My mind, for so long occupied with supply chains, marketing strategies, and profit margins, shifted gears, accessing older, more primal circuits. This wasn't a boardroom negotiation. This was a threat assessment. Amelia wasn't a fool. A fast-acting poison would have been an immediate disaster for her. It would have triggered a full-scale investigation, an autopsy. Questions would be asked. Amelia, the last person to handle my glass, would be the first person they looked at. No, she was more clever than that. So, what was in the powder? I walked to my study, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked, each tick a hammer blow marking the seconds of my new reality. I sat behind my large mahogany desk, the surface a mirror of polished wood, and folded my hands. Objective: incapacitate Evelyn Reed. Method: a substance that mimics a plausible medical event for a 72-year-old woman. Possible agents: a massive dose of a beta blocker to trigger cardiac arrest. A potent anticoagulant to induce a cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke. Or perhaps something more insidious. A fast-acting psychotropic drug, something that would bring on sudden, extreme confusion, memory loss, paranoia. The elegance of the plan was in its cruelty. They wouldn't have to murder me. They would just have to manage my tragic, sudden decline. They would be the heroes. The devoted son and daughter-in-law, forced to take control of their beloved mother's fortune to protect her from herself. They would sell this house, liquidate my assets, and place me in the most expensive, comfortable care facility money could buy. A gilded cage where I would live out my days as a ghost, a shell, while they lived my life. And Daniel, my son. Was he a willing participant? Or a pawn, manipulated by his wife's desperation? I thought of his soft heart, his lifelong desire to please, his inherent weakness in the face of a strong will. He loved me, I knew that. But he was also deeply in debt. I'd seen the signs, the carefully casual mentions of market downturns and tight quarters. Amelia had likely convinced him this was a mercy. A way to help me before I lost my mind for real. The lie would be wrapped in the language of love. It always is. I could call the police. What would I say? My daughter-in-law, the picture of civic virtue, tried to drug me at my retirement party. No, I have no proof. No, I wasn't harmed. The glass? The waiter took it away hours ago. They would take my statement with polite, condescending sympathy. A file would be opened and then buried under a mountain of actual crimes. I would be labeled the hysterical, paranoid old woman, proving Amelia's point before she even had to make it. I was utterly, completely alone in this. My reputation, my age, my very love for my family had been turned into weapons to be used against me. A deep, shuddering breath escaped my lips. For a moment, I felt the cold grip of true fear. Not the fear of losing money, but the fear of losing my mind, my freedom, myself. The fear of Lily seeing me as a doddering, helpless creature. I looked up, and my reflection stared back at me from the darkened window pane. I saw the fine lines around my eyes, the silver in my hair. I saw a 72-year-old woman. But beneath the surface, I saw the girl who started a business with a handsaw and a $60 loan. I saw the executive who stared down union bosses and corporate raiders. I saw a survivor. They had mistaken my retirement for surrender. They had mistaken my love for weakness. They thought the titan of industry was gone, replaced by a grandmother who baked cookies and tended her roses. They were wrong. The fear receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that felt like an old friend. This house was not a mausoleum. It was my fortress. My mind was not failing. It was my sharpest weapon. Amelia and Daniel thought they were playing checkers. They had no idea I was a grandmaster at chess. My first move had been to switch the glasses. An instinctual act of self-preservation. Now, it was time for strategy. It was time to remind them who Evelyn Reed truly was. The game was on. And I would not lose. Morning sunlight, usually a welcome guest, sliced through the blinds of my bedroom, striping the walls in bars of gold and shadow. I had not slept. Sleep was a luxury for the untroubled, and my mind had been a frantic workshop all night, dismantling the past and designing the future. I showered, the hot water a temporary balm on my chilled skin, and dressed not in the soft cashmere of a retiree, but in a crisp linen blouse and tailored slacks. Armor. I made my coffee, strong and black, and sat at the kitchen island, the marble cool beneath my forearms. The house was still. Too still. I needed information. I needed to know their state of mind, their next move. At precisely 9:15 a.m., I dialed Daniel's number. I let the phone ring 4 times before hanging up. A direct call might seem confrontational. A missed call from his frail mother, however, would trigger concern. I waited exactly 3 minutes. My phone buzzed on the countertop. Daniel's face, smiling in a photo with Lily on his shoulders, lit up the screen. I took a breath, summoning a voice that was a careful blend of tired and slightly befuddled. Daniel? Oh, hello, darling. Mom? I just saw you called. Is everything okay? You didn't answer. His voice was laced with that familiar, anxious affection. Oh, did I? I'm sorry, dear, my fingers must have slipped. This new phone. I let the sentence trail off, a perfect seed of manufactured incompetence. I'm just a little scattered this morning. Such a big night. You should be scattered. You should be sleeping in until noon, he said, his relief palpable. How are you feeling? Really? A little foggy, to be honest, I admitted, the lie tasting like ash. My head is just full. You know, with the sale of the company finalized, there are so many loose ends. Old paperwork, investments, it's all a bit of a jumble. This was the opening. I leaned into it. In fact, I continued, injecting a note of hesitant confusion into my voice, I was just looking at my calendar. I seem to have an appointment scheduled for tomorrow with David Chen. My lawyer. I can't for the life of me remember why I made it. Silence on the other end of the line. Not a dead silence, but a charged one. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. I could almost picture him holding a hand over the receiver, whispering frantically to Amelia. With David Chen? Daniel's voice was suddenly sharper, the casual warmth replaced by a focused concern that was just a little too intense. Mom, are you sure? Maybe you should cancel. You need to rest. Let all that business stuff go for a week or 2. On the other side of his line, I heard a distinct, sharp whisper. It was Amelia's voice, too faint to make out the words, but the tone was urgent. A hiss. Well, I'd hate to be rude and just cancel, I said, my voice wavering slightly. David is such an old friend. I think it was something about, oh, goodness, what was it? Something about the estate. Just reviewing the old will, I suppose. Making sure everything is in order now that things have changed. The word will hung in the air between us like a lit fuse. The will? Daniel's voice was now strained. Mom, there's no need to rush into that. We can handle all of it. Amelia is wonderful with organizing things. Why don't you let us come over, we can look at the paperwork together, save you a trip. The offer was so predictable it was almost comical. Let us see what you have. Let us see who controls what. Let us see how easy it will be to take it. Oh, that's sweet of you, dear, but I wouldn't want to be a bother, I demurred, playing the role of the self-effacing mother to perfection. Besides, David and I go way back. It will be nice to catch up. I'm sure it's nothing important. Just housekeeping. Another furious, muffled whisper from Amelia's direction. Mom, please, Daniel insisted, his voice taking on a wheedling tone I hadn't heard since he was a teenager trying to borrow the car. I insist. It's no bother. We're worried about you. You're taking on too much. Let us help. We can come over this afternoon. We'll bring Lily. Lily. The human shield. The emotional blackmail. I sighed, a long, weary sound I had practiced in the mirror that morning. All right, Daniel. If you insist. But really, it's not necessary. It is, he said, the relief in his voice making him sound years younger. We'll be there around 3. Just relax, Mom. We'll take care of everything. We said our goodbyes and I hung up the phone. I sat in the silent kitchen, my coffee now cold. The bait was not just swallowed, it had been devoured. They were coming. Not out of love or concern, but out of panic. The idea of me meeting with my lawyer, alone and unsupervised, had sent them scrambling. They needed to assess the situation, re-establish control, and gauge the extent of my decline. I stood up and walked to the phone, my movements calm and deliberate. I dialed a different number, one I knew by heart. It was answered on the second ring. David Chin speaking. David, I said, and this time my voice was my own, clear, steady, and cold as forged steel. It's Evelyn. We need to meet. Not tomorrow. Today. And not at your office. There was a pause. David had been my lawyer and my friend for 40 years. He knew my voice better than anyone. He could hear the nuance, the shift from CEO to something else. He heard the alarm bell I was ringing. Where and when, he asked, no questions, no pleasantries. Just the crisp efficiency I valued so much. The diner off Route 7, I said. The one with the cracked vinyl booths. 1 hour. And David, I added, my voice dropping lower, we are going to war. The scent of stale coffee and frying bacon at the diner was a world away from the perfumed air of my party. It was real. Grounded. David Chin sat across from me in a cracked red vinyl booth, his hands wrapped around a thick ceramic mug. His face, a roadmap of 70 years of shrewd negotiations and courtroom battles, was grim. He had listened to my story without interruption, his sharp, intelligent eyes never leaving mine. So you switched the glasses, he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question. It was instinct, I replied, pushing a loose strand of hair from my face. The planning came later. And you think Daniel is in on it? I hesitated, the mother in me warring with the strategist. He's a participant. Whether he's the architect of the plan or just a tool. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. He stood by and let it happen. The words tasted like poison. David nodded slowly. This isn't just about money, Evelyn. This is about erasure. They want to invalidate your entire life, make you a footnote in your own story. We can't let that happen. He took a sip of his coffee. The police are useless at this stage. You're right. It becomes a messy, he said. She said that will only feed their narrative of you being unstable. We have to fight this on your terms. Quietly. Brutally. That's why I called you, David. Good, he said, his focus absolute. First, we let them walk into the parlor. You play the part they've cast for you. Be forgetful. Be confused. Let them think their plan is working, that last night's failure was just a fluke, a miscalculation in the dosage. I can do that, I said, my voice hard. Second, he continued, leaning forward, we need to know exactly what we're up against. The why is obvious, $23 million. But we need the specifics. Their debts, their vulnerabilities. We need leverage. How? I know a man, David said. Marcus Thorne. Ex-NYPD. Now a private investigator. He's discreet, expensive, and looks more like a disgruntled plumber than a detective. He's perfect. He'll dig into every corner of their lives. Bank accounts, credit cards, business associates. He'll find the cracks. An hour later, I was back home, the smell of bacon replaced by the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. I sat in my living room, a heavy volume of art history open on my lap, my reading glasses perched on my nose. I was the picture of serene retirement. When the doorbell chimed at 3 o'clock on the dot, my heart gave a hard, painful thud. The curtain was rising. Grandma. Lily flew into my arms the moment I opened the door, a whirlwind of summer dress and pigtails. I hugged her tight, burying my face in her hair, drawing strength from her innocent warmth. "There's my little firefly," I murmured. Behind her, Daniel and Amelia stood on the porch, their arms laden with grocery bags. They were the image of dutiful children. "We brought you some things, Mom," Daniel said, his smile bright and wide. "Figured you shouldn't have to worry about shopping." Amelia kissed my cheek. Her skin was cool. "We were so worried about you last night. You really gave us a scare." Her eyes were full of practiced concern. The campaign began subtly. While putting away the groceries, Amelia clucked her tongue. "Oh, Evelyn, this milk expired 3 days ago. It's a good thing we came. You have to be more careful." I knew for a fact I had bought that carton yesterday. I glanced at the date. The expiration was a week away. But I said nothing, just gave a little, embarrassed laugh. "Oh, dear. See? My head is in the clouds." Later, while Daniel was fixing a supposedly leaky faucet under the sink, Amelia rearranged the silver picture frames on the mantelpiece. An hour after that, as I walked through the living room, she said, "Are you looking for your reading glasses, Evelyn? They're right here, on your head." She smiled, a gentle, condescending smile. My glasses were, of course, folded on the end table where I had left them. It was a classic gaslighting technique, a slow, methodical erosion of my confidence. They were creating a reality of my incompetence, one expired milk carton and one misplaced pair of glasses at a time. They were planting seeds of doubt, not just for me, but for anyone who might visit. The final move of the day was the most brazen. "You know, Mom," Daniel said, wiping his hands on a towel. "This is a big house for one person. Amelia and I were talking. We found this wonderful woman, Clara. She helps out a few of our friends. Just light housekeeping, maybe helps with meals. It would take such a load off your mind." "I have a cleaning service, Daniel," I said, keeping my tone mild. "It's not the same," Amelia interjected smoothly. "This is more companionship. Someone to be here, just in case. We'd feel so much better." They weren't asking. They were informing. Clara, I knew, would not be a housekeeper. She would be a warden. A spy who would report my every word, my every lapse in memory, back to them. She would be their witness when the time came to call a doctor, to convene a competency hearing. I looked from my son's earnest, pleading face to my daughter-in-law's perfectly composed mask of compassion. They were building my prison around me, brick by loving, considerate brick. And they expected me to thank them for it. "Well," I said, forcing a fragile smile. "If it would make you feel better, I suppose we could give it a try." Their shared look of triumph was fleeting, but I saw it. Check. The second chess piece had been moved into position. They thought it was theirs. They had no idea it was mine. Clara arrived 2 days later. She was a stout woman in her late 50s with a face that seemed permanently set in an expression of mild disapproval and orthopedic shoes that squeaked on the hardwood floors. She moved through my house with a proprietary air, her presence a constant, low-grade hum of surveillance. She would tidy my desk, her eyes lingering on my mail. She would help in the kitchen, watching to see if I could operate the coffee maker correctly. She was a spy, and a clumsy one at that. I played my part. I forgot where I put my keys. I struggled to remember the name of a distant cousin in a photograph. I allowed Clara to find these things for me, to correct me, her pursed lips a silent testament to my decline that I knew was being reported back to Daniel and Amelia in nightly phone calls. Every squeak of her shoes was a reminder that the walls were closing in. My only true respite was in my workshop, the large converted garage where Reed and Company had been born. The scent of cedar and turpentine was the smell of my own sovereignty. Clara did not venture in here. It was dusty, and she was, in Amelia's words, allergic. Here, surrounded by my tools, the chisels and planes that had been extensions of my own hands for 50 years, I could breathe. And I could plan. My meeting with David had set the wheels in motion, but I needed to see him again, to get the report from his detective, Marcus Thorne. Calling him from the house was too risky. Clara had the uncanny ability to appear with a feather duster the moment I picked up the phone. So, I created an opportunity. "Clara," I called from the living room one morning, my voice pitched with the right amount of elderly frailty. "I have a terrible craving for those lemon scones from the Gilded Spoon. Would you be a dear and drive into town to fetch me some?" Her face soured. A trip into town was not part of her mission. "Are you sure you should be eating those, Mrs. Reed? All that sugar." "Oh, let an old woman have her vices," I said with a weak smile. "I'll be fine. I'll just be pottering about in my garden." The moment her sensible sedan cleared the driveway, I was in motion. I didn't go to the garden. I went to my workshop, slipped out the back door, and walked through the woods that bordered my property to the quiet country lane on the other side. My heart hammered against my ribs, a thrilling, youthful rhythm of rebellion. 2 miles down the lane, tucked behind a grove of birch trees, was the unprepossessing cafe where David had agreed to meet me. He was already there, in a booth at the back, a manila folder on the table in front of him. He looked up as I slid onto the bench opposite him, my cheeks flushed from the walk. "Your son calls me twice a day," he said without preamble. "Wants to schedule a meeting to review your portfolio. He's getting impatient." "Let him," I said, catching my breath. "What did Thorne find?" David opened the folder. He didn't need to read from the pages, he had clearly memorized the contents. "It's worse than we thought, Evelyn. They're not just in debt. They're drowning." He laid it all out. Daniel's tech startup, the one he'd been so optimistic about, had been a catastrophic failure. He'd poured not only his own money into it but had taken out a second mortgage on their house, a house already mortgaged to the hilt. Amelia, it turned out, had developed a taste for luxury that far outstripped their income. The folder contained copies of credit card statements that were a litany of designer boutiques, exclusive spas, and 5-star resorts. They had leveraged everything, gambled everything, on the expectation of my inheritance. "The sale of your company wasn't just a windfall for them," David said, his voice grim. "It was a lifeline. Their last one. They're about 90 days from total financial collapse. Foreclosure, bankruptcy, the works." I felt a cold sickness spread through my stomach. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the sheer, reckless stupidity of it all. The waste. I had taught Daniel the value of $1, the pride of building something from nothing. Or so I had thought. It seemed the only lesson he'd learned was how to spend. "And Amelia?" I asked, my voice quiet. "She's the driver," David confirmed, tapping a page. Thorne found records of several high-interest personal loans taken out in her name from less than reputable lenders. The kind of people who don't file lawsuits when you default. They send visitors. He looked me straight in the eye. "She's not just ambitious, Evelyn. She's desperate. And a desperate person will do anything." We sat in silence for a moment, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen the only sound. The picture was now brutally clear. This wasn't a crime of convenience. It was a crime of necessity. They hadn't tried to drug me because they were greedy, they'd done it because they were trapped. "So what's our next move?" I finally asked. "Thorne is still digging," David said. "He's looking for the source of the powder. A long shot, but he has contacts. In the meantime, you need to continue the charade. But we need to escalate. We need to give them a reason to make a mistake, to expose themselves." We began to sketch out a plan, our voices low and urgent. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. I had to appear vulnerable enough to embolden them, but not so vulnerable that they succeeded in having me committed before I could spring the trap. We needed to create a crisis, a financial puzzle that only they could solve for me, forcing them to act in a way we could document. I left the cafe the way I came, my mind buzzing with the grim details of my son's failure and the cold mechanics of our strategy. As I slipped back into my workshop, the smell of cedarwood felt less like a comfort and more like a reminder of the solid, real world I was fighting to hold on to. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel. Clara was back with the scones. I walked out to meet her, composing my face into a mask of benign gratitude. As I took the pastry box from her, I let my hand tremble just enough for her to notice. "Thank you, dear," I said, my voice thin. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her suspicious gaze softened, just for a second, into something resembling pity. It was a look I would learn to despise. It was the look of a jailer for a prisoner who doesn't even know she's behind bars. The report from Marcus Thorne was more than just a list of debts. It was a blueprint of my son's life, and it broke my heart. I sat in my workshop, the single bare bulb overhead casting long shadows, and read the typed pages again. Daniel, my charming, affable son, had failed at everything he'd ever tried to do on his own. The tech startup, the real estate venture before that, the art gallery he'd briefly managed, each was a testament to his poor judgment and his inability to say no. He wasn't a villain. He was a man-child, forever chasing the next shiny idea, convinced that success was just around the corner, a trait he inherited from his father. But unlike his father, who had a bedrock of common sense, Daniel had Amelia. She was his enabler and his executioner. She'd encouraged his dreams, basking in the reflected glow of his ambition, while simultaneously running up debts that made his failure not just a disappointment, but a potential catastrophe. The photos Thorne had included were even more damning. Candid shots of them at charity galas, Amelia draped in jewels I knew Daniel couldn't afford. A picture of the new Mercedes in their driveway. A vacation to St. Bart's just 6 months ago, when, according to the bank statements, they were already missing mortgage payments. They weren't just living beyond their means, they were living in a complete fantasy, a beautiful, fragile bubble financed by my impending death or incapacitation. The anger I felt was a cold, clean fire. It burned away the last vestiges of maternal sentimentality. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about saving Daniel from himself, and more importantly, saving Lily from them. What kind of future could a child have with parents whose moral compass was so completely shattered? My own life, built on discipline and hard work, felt like a reproach to theirs. I had never bought what I couldn't afford. My first desk was an old door set on 2 sawhorses. My first car was a 10-year-old Ford Falcon. The luxury I now enjoyed had been earned, dollar by painstaking dollar. They had seen the result, but they had refused to learn the lesson. They wanted the house without laying the foundation. I folded the report and hid it inside a hollowed-out book on woodworking. My own secret ledger. Seeing the raw numbers, the sheer scale of their desperation, solidified the next step of the plan David and I had devised. I had to become the solution to their problem. I had to become the helpless mother with a fortune that needed managing. The next time they visited, bringing Lily as they always did, I was ready. I sat at my large secretary desk in the living room, papers spread out around me in a chaotic mess. Bank statements, investment summaries, some real, some artfully crafted fakes from David's office, created a picture of overwhelming complexity. "Grandma, what are you doing?" Lily asked, peering over my shoulder. "Oh, just homework for old people, my love," I said, patting her hand. Amelia's eyes, sharp and predatory, scanned the papers. "Is everything all right, Evelyn?" I looked up, my face a carefully constructed mask of anxiety. To be honest, it's all a bit much. Since the sale, there are so many new accounts, transfers, tax implications. My head is just spinning. I pushed a stray piece of hair from my forehead. I had a letter from the bank today. Something about an international wire transfer. I don't remember authorizing one. It's probably nothing, but I let my voice trail off, planting the seed of a financial irregularity, a potential vulnerability in my fortress of wealth. Daniel immediately stepped forward, the dutiful son. A wire transfer? Mom, you need to be careful. There are so many scams targeting seniors these days. Let me see the letter. Oh, I don't know where I put it, I said, fluttering my hands over the papers. It's in this mess somewhere. I'm just so disorganized lately. Amelia placed a cool, steadying hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt like a brand. Evelyn, this is exactly what we were worried about. You can't be expected to manage all this by yourself. It's a full-time job. Please, let us help you. Let Daniel take a look. He's very good with these things. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Daniel, who had hemorrhaged money for a decade, was now being presented as my financial savior. I looked into my son's eyes and saw not deceit, but a desperate, pathetic hope. He truly believed he could fix this. He could manage my money, pay off his secret debts, and no one would be the wiser. In his mind, he was probably the hero of this story. I suppose you could help me sort through it all, I conceded, my voice weak. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and the fine print is so tiny. The relief on their faces was a physical thing. It was as if I had just thrown them a life raft. That afternoon, Daniel sat at my desk, diligently organizing my papers, while Amelia made us all tea. She was humming. It was the most relaxed I had seen her since the party. They believed they were winning. They were taking control, piece by piece, not with a drug, but with my own manufactured consent. As they packed up to leave, Amelia gave me a hug. You did the right thing, Evelyn, she whispered in my ear. Now you can relax. We'll take care of everything from now on. I watched them walk to their car, Lily skipping ahead. They looked like the perfect family. The loving son and daughter-in-law, caring for their aging mother. No one would ever suspect the truth. The beautiful life they had built was a house of cards, and they were about to gamble it all on the belief that I was too old and too weak to notice. They had no idea I was the one who had dealt the hand. The visits became a daily ritual. Daniel would arrive after work, his briefcase full of my financial problems, and spread my life out on the dining room table. He'd sit there for hours, a look of intense concentration on his face, creating spreadsheets and making calls to clarify things with my bank. He was a boy playing CEO with his mother's empire, and the sense of importance puffed him up, making him seem taller, more confident than I'd seen him in years. Amelia, meanwhile, orchestrated the domestic theater. She would bring over home-cooked meals in Tupperware containers, reorganize my pantry, and consult with Clara in hushed, serious tones. She was solidifying her role as the indispensable caregiver, the architect of my comfortable, managed decline. But her methods were growing crueler, more insidious. She began to use Lily. It started subtly. Amelia would bring Lily over on a Saturday morning, ostensibly so they could spend time with me. But the entire visit would be a masterclass in psychological warfare. Lily, darling, make sure you hold Grandma's hand when you go into the garden, Amelia would say in her bright, cheerful voice. Her balance isn't very good these days. Or, while we were baking cookies, an activity that had always been our special domain, Amelia would interject. Lily, why don't you read the recipe for Grandma? Sometimes the words get a little jumbled for her. Each comment was a small, sharp pinprick in the fabric of my relationship with my granddaughter. I would see the flicker of confusion, then concern, in Lily's eyes. She would look from her mother's smiling face to mine, and her small hand would grip mine a little tighter. She was being taught to see me not as her strong, capable grandmother, but as someone fragile, breakable, and unreliable. The most painful moment came one afternoon when Lily and I were in the workshop. I was showing her how to identify different types of wood by their grain and scent: walnut, cherry, oak. It was a lesson my own father had taught me. Lily was tracing the whorls on a piece of bird's eye maple, her brow furrowed in concentration. Amelia appeared in the doorway, a sentinel in a cashmere sweater set. "Lily, what are you doing in here?" she asked, her voice tight with disapproval. "It's so dusty. And all these sharp tools. Grandma, you really shouldn't have her in here. It's not safe." "It's perfectly safe, Amelia," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm right here with her." "But what if you forgot?" Amelia's voice was soft, laced with a terrible, feigned sympathy. She knelt down to Lily's level. "Honey, you have to be careful. Grandma is getting very forgetful. She might not remember that the saw is sharp, or that she left the lacquer open. You have to be the grown-up and make sure she stays safe, okay?" I watched, frozen, as my daughter-in-law poisoned my granddaughter's mind against me. She was turning Lily into my keeper. She was stealing our shared world, our sanctuary, and reframing it as a place of danger and incompetence. I saw the light of wonder in Lily's eyes dim, replaced by a shadow of fear. She took a small step back from the workbench, away from me. That was the line. They could try to take my money. They could try to take my freedom. But they would not take my granddaughter's love. They would not warp her into a tool for their own greed. When they left that evening, the echo of Amelia's words still hung in the sawdust-scented air of the workshop. The pain was so sharp it was almost physical, a hot stone in my chest. But beneath the pain, something else was hardening. My resolve. The game had been one of quiet observation and subtle manipulation. Now, it was time to change the rules. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. David and I had planned to draw them out slowly, but Amelia's cruelty had accelerated the timeline. They felt secure. They felt they were in control. It was the perfect time to set the trap. I went to my office and pulled out the burner phone David had given me. I dialed the number for Marcus Thorne. "It's Evelyn Reed," I said when he answered. "I need the cameras. Tomorrow." "They're ready," his gruff voice replied. "Where do you want them?" "My study," I said, my eyes scanning the room that had once been the heart of my business, the place where I had made my fortune. "And I want audio. I want every single word." It was time to create a crisis they couldn't resist. It was time to build a stage, and on that stage, my son and his wife would be given the opportunity to perform their final, damning act. And I would be the director, the audience, and the executioner, all in one. The weapon named Lily had been turned against me. Now, my love for her would become my own. Marcus Thorne moved with the quiet invisibility of a ghost. He arrived the next day while Clara was at the grocery store, disguised in the blue overalls of an internet repairman, his truck nondescript. He was a man of few words and immense competence. In under an hour, he had installed 2 micro cameras in my study, one hidden in the spine of a leather-bound book on the shelf, the other concealed in the base of a brass desk lamp. The microphones were even smaller, artfully placed to capture every whisper. "The feed goes directly to a secure server," he explained, showing me a simple app on my burner phone. "Live view and recording. Point, click, and it's on. Just make sure you're connected to the guest Wi-Fi, not your main one. They might be smart enough to check the network traffic." After he left, the study felt different. Charged. It was no longer just a room, it was a stage. A trap. Now, I had to bait it. The plan David and I had refined was simple in its execution but relied entirely on my ability to perform. I had to be the panicked, deteriorating matriarch pushed to the brink of a financial crisis, a crisis so confusing and frightening that I would be desperate for my son's help. I waited 2 days, letting the tension build. I made a few scattered calls to Daniel, asking him confusing questions about stock symbols and capital gains, reinforcing the narrative of my incompetence. Then, on Friday morning, I made the call. I took several deep breaths, picturing the most vulnerable moments of my life, channeling the fear and uncertainty. I roughened my voice slightly, as if I had been crying. I dialed his number. Daniel? I said, my voice a panicked, breathless whisper the moment he answered. Mom? What's wrong? You sound awful. Something's happened, I said, letting a sob catch in my throat. I got more letters. From the bank. And one from the IRS. They're talking about an audit. About penalties. Daniel, I don't understand any of it. They're using words, offshore accounts, undeclared assets. I've never had such things. I was improvising, using the scariest words a wealthy person can hear. On the other end of the line, there was a sharp intake of breath. What? Mom, slow down. An audit? I could hear the greed and alarm warring in his voice. Alarm at the thought of the government seizing the money, greed at the opportunity this presented. I tried to call Mr. Chin, but his secretary said he's in court all day. I lied, my voice trembling. I don't know who else to turn to. There are so many numbers, so many forms. I think someone might have stolen from me, Daniel. From the company, before the sale. And now the government thinks it was me. It was the perfect bait. A threat to the fortune, coupled with a plausible story of my victimization, all wrapped in a cloak of my own helplessness. I had created a fire that only he, my self-appointed financial guardian, could put out. Don't do anything, Mom, he said, his voice taking on a commanding tone. Don't call anyone else. Amelia and I are on our way. We'll sort it out. Just sit tight. And gather all the papers. All of them. Okay, Daniel, I whispered, as if I were a frightened child. Please hurry. I hung up and my entire demeanor shifted. The trembling stopped. The fear in my eyes was replaced by a glint of cold steel. I walked into the study and activated the app on the burner phone. A small green light indicated the cameras were live. I then set the stage. I took the forged documents David's office had created, official-looking letters from the IRS, complicated bank statements showing fictitious, alarming transfers, and scattered them across my desk. I added some of my real financial records to the mix to make it all look authentic. The final touch was a half-empty glass of sherry and a box of tissues. The scene screamed of an old woman in distress. I sat in my high-backed leather chair, the one that faced the door, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 40 minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel, moving far too fast. I heard the slam of car doors. I composed my face into a mask of tear-streaked misery and fear. The sharks were circling. The bait was in the water. And the cage was about to close. The study door opened without a knock. Daniel rushed in first, his face a mask of concern, followed by Amelia, cool and poised, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in the chaos on my desk, my trembling hands, my tear-stained face. She was assessing the situation like a general surveying a battlefield. Mom, what's all this? Daniel asked, gesturing to the papers. He picked up one of the fake IRS letters, his eyes widening at the official letterhead and the ominous-sounding jargon. I told you, I don't understand it, I whimpered, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. It's a nightmare. For the next hour, they were the perfect image of a crisis management team. Daniel sorted through the papers, his brow furrowed, making serious, clucking sounds. Amelia made me a cup of chamomile tea, her hand stroking my back in a gesture that was meant to be soothing but felt proprietary. It looks like a mess, Evelyn, Amelia said, her voice dripping with sympathy. A real, tangled mess. It's clear you've been the victim of some very clever fraud before the sale. Trying to untangle this with the IRS, it will take months, maybe years. It will be a full-time battle. A battle you shouldn't have to fight, Mom, Daniel added, looking up from the desk. He looked exhausted, overwhelmed, but also excited. He was in his element, the man with the plan. This requires aggressive, daily management. Phone calls, lawyers, accountants. It's too much for you. This was it. The moment they had been working towards since the night of the party. The moment they had laid the groundwork for with every feigned concern, with every condescending comment, with every act of manufactured care. Amelia walked over to the large leather satchel she'd brought in with her. "That's why we came prepared, Evelyn," she said softly. She placed a sheaf of professionally bound documents on the blotter in front of me, next to a handsome fountain pen. "We spoke to our own lawyer this morning, just a preliminary consultation. He said the best way to protect you and your assets is to temporarily assign control to a trusted party. A durable power of attorney." Daniel came to stand behind me, his hands on my shoulders. "It's just a formality, Mom. It gives me the authority to speak to the IRS on your behalf, to manage the accounts, to hire the right people to clean this up. It puts the burden on my shoulders, so you don't have to worry about a thing. Once this is all settled, we can tear it up." I stared at the document. The language was dense and legal, but the intent was crystal clear. Full and unrestricted power. Financial and medical decisions. Irrevocable. This wasn't a temporary measure. This was an abdication. A signature on this paper would be the end of Evelyn Reed. I would become a ward of my son, a ghost in my own life, my fortune legally his to control, to spend, to save their sinking ship. I looked up at them. At my son, his face so earnest and convincing. At my daughter-in-law, her expression a perfect blend of compassion and resolve. They were so close. They could taste it. And then, another man stepped into the room. He was a portly man in a slightly too tight suit, a nervous smile on his face. "Evelyn," Amelia said smoothly. "This is our friend, Mr. Abernathy. He's a notary. He was kind enough to come with us, just to make everything official and save you a trip." Of course. They had brought the entire execution squad. Mr. Abernathy set his briefcase down and produced his notary stamp. "Just need your signature on the marked lines, Mrs. Reed, and a thumbprint right here," he said cheerfully. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. My hand, to my own surprise, was perfectly steady. I could feel their collective gaze on me, feel them holding their breath. This was the culmination of their entire plan. The checkmate. I uncapped the pen. The nib hovered over the signature line. I looked at the paper, then I looked up, my eyes meeting Daniel's. I let him see the fear, the confusion, the vulnerability I had been performing for weeks. Then, slowly, deliberately, I let it all drain away. My back straightened. The tremor in my hand vanished. The watery, frightened look in my eyes sharpened into something hard and bright, a clarity that Daniel hadn't seen since I'd caught him trying to sneak out of the house when he was 16. My voice, when I spoke, was not the reedy, wavering tone of a confused old woman. It was the voice that had chaired board meetings and struck fear into the hearts of my competitors. It was quiet, perfectly modulated, and cut through the expectant silence of the room like a shard of glass. "I don't think that will be necessary." The shock on their faces was a physical thing. Daniel flinched as if I'd slapped him. Amelia's compassionate mask dissolved, revealing the raw, startled fury beneath. Mr. Abernathy's cheerful smile froze and then evaporated. I set the pen down, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the blotter. "No," I said again, my gaze sweeping over the three of them. "I don't think I'll be signing anything today." The trap had sprung. The silence in the study was no longer expectant, it was heavy, suffocating. Daniel stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, disbelief, fear, flashing in his eyes. Amelia was faster to recover. Her face hardened, the soft lines of concern sharpening into angles of pure anger. "What do you mean, Evelyn?" she snapped, her voice losing its gentle cadence and taking on a sharp, metallic edge. "This is for your own good. Did you not hear a word we said?" "Oh, I heard every word," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I reached for the small, discreet remote control I had placed on the corner of my desk. It looked like a simple presenter's tool. In fact, I find I've been paying very close attention lately. I aimed the remote at the large, dark screen of the smart television mounted on the wall opposite my desk. I pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, not with a news channel or a screensaver, but with a simple, clean computer desktop interface. In the center was a single folder, its title displayed in a stark, white font, Read Family Finances. Amelia's eyes widened. Daniel took an involuntary step back. You see, I've been doing a bit of my own housekeeping, I said, my gaze fixed on them. I clicked another button. The folder opened, revealing a neat array of subfolders and documents. Let's start with the house. The second mortgage you took out last November, Daniel. Was that before or after you told me your startup was on the verge of a breakthrough? I clicked again. A scanned copy of the mortgage document filled the screen, Daniel's and Amelia's signatures clearly visible at the bottom. Daniel's face went white. And Amelia, my dear, I continued, my voice as cool and methodical as a surgeon's scalpel. Your credit card statements. Fascinating reading. It seems the price of a beautiful life has gone up considerably. That trip to St. Bart's. Click. A credit card statement appeared, the charges from a 5-star resort highlighted in red. Coincided precisely with the 2 mortgage payments you missed. I went on, my voice a relentless monotone, clicking through the evidence Marcus Thorne had gathered. The high-interest loans. The car lease. The cascading defaults. The final document I brought up was a summary page, a simple spreadsheet showing their total assets versus their total debts. The final number at the bottom was a staggering figure in the red. $23 million, I said quietly. It wasn't just a retirement fund for me, was it? It was a bailout package for you. Your only way out of a hole you dug for yourselves with breathtaking irresponsibility. Amelia's composure finally shattered. You had no right, she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. Spying on us. Prying into our private lives. My private life seems to have been your primary business concern for the last month, I countered icily. You wanted to manage my assets? First, you have to prove you can manage your own. I leaned forward. But this is just about poor judgment. What I find more interesting is the issue of criminal intent. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black, and a sound file began to play. It was audio only, slightly tinny, overlaid with the gentle hum of a car engine. It was their conversation on the drive over, recorded by a device Thorne had planted in their car the week before. Amelia's voice, clear as a bell, just needs one final push, Danny. She's terrified about this IRS thing. She'll sign anything today. We just have to be calm and loving. Daniel's voice, hesitant, I don't know, Amy. She seems more aware some days. What if she calls Chin? Amelia's reply, laced with contempt, she won't. Her mind is going. Clara said she couldn't find her own teacup yesterday. She's a confused old woman sitting on a pile of money she doesn't know what to do with. We are doing her a favor. We're securing Lily's future. The audio clicked off. The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Abernathy, the notary, looked as though he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He was slowly, almost imperceptibly, backing towards the door. Daniel crumpled. It wasn't a dramatic fall, but a slow, boneless collapse into the chair opposite my desk. He covered his face with his hands and began to sob deep, ragged, broken sounds. The sounds of a child who had finally been caught. Amelia, however, was made of harder material. With her lies stripped away, all that remained was pure, distilled resentment. Her face was a pale, tight mask of hatred. You've always hated me, she hissed, her body trembling with rage. From the very beginning. You never thought I was good enough for your perfect son. You held your money over our heads like a queen on her throne. You controlled everything. You suffocated him, suffocated us. We did what we had to do to be free of you. The sheer, unvarnished venom of her words was stunning. The victimhood she claimed was so warped, so completely detached from reality, that for a moment I could only stare at her. She truly believed it. She was the hero of her own dark fairy tale. You call an attempt to drug me and steal my entire fortune doing what you had to do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Daniel's head shot up at my words, his tear-streaked face a picture of horror. Drug you? What is she talking about, Amy? You told me it was just a mild sedative, to calm her down if she got agitated. Amelia shot him a look of pure loathing. Oh, grow up, Daniel. What did you think was going to happen? And there it was. The final, ugly truth. My son wasn't the mastermind. He was just the fool. A weak, willing, cowardly fool. I looked at the wreckage of my family before me, my son, a broken man-child, and his wife, a venomous stranger. The triumph I had expected to feel was absent. In its place was a vast, hollow ache. I had won. But dear God, look at what I had lost. The room was thick with the stench of revealed truths. Mr. Abernathy, the notary, finally found his courage and, with a mumbled apology about a forgotten appointment, scurried out of the study, closing the door softly behind him as if leaving a tomb. Now it was just the three of us, the architects of this family's ruin. Daniel was still staring at Amelia, the revelation that he'd been a party to an attempted poisoning, not just a gentle sedation, dawning on him with the slow, sickening horror of a sunrise over a battlefield. The distinction was, in my mind, a pathetic exercise in self-delusion, but for him, it seemed to be the final straw that broke his spine. A sedative, you said, a mild sedative, he stammered, his voice cracking. You swore to me, Amy. And you were happy to believe me, weren't you? She spat back, turning her fury on him. As long as you didn't have to know the grubby details. As long as you could pretend you were the good son, just helping your poor, dotty mother, while I did the dirty work. She was right. He had wanted the reward without acknowledging the crime. He had outsourced his conscience to her. I let them tear at each other for a moment, their ugly, codependent dance laid bare under the harsh light of the study lamp. Then, I cleared my throat. The sound was quiet, but it cut through their argument like a guillotine. They both fell silent and looked at me. The judge. This is what is going to happen, I said, and my voice held no room for negotiation. It was the voice of finality. I looked directly at Daniel, bypassing Amelia as if she were a piece of furniture. First, there will be no police. There will be no charges. A flicker of hope, of relief, crossed Daniel's face. Amelia's expression turned smug. She thought she'd gotten away with it. Do not mistake my silence for forgiveness, I continued, my voice dropping to an icy whisper that extinguished their relief. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this for Lily. Her life will not be defined by a public scandal. Her father will not be a convicted felon, and her mother will not be. I paused, letting the unspoken words hang in the air. I am giving you a path out of this that does not involve prison. It is the only gift you will ever receive from me again. I folded my hands on the desk. Daniel. You will file for divorce. Immediately. The grounds will be irreconcilable differences. It will be quiet and uncontested. Amelia will leave your house and your life. She will sign away all parental rights to Lily. No. Amelia shrieked. You can't. She's my daughter. You used your daughter as a weapon against me, I said, my voice unyielding. You used her to gaslight and isolate me. You forfeited the right to be her mother when you did that. She will not be raised by a woman who sees her as a tool. This is not negotiable. Amelia looked to Daniel for support, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the polished mahogany of my desk as if it held the answers to the universe. Second, I went on, my gaze still locked on my son. Amelia will leave with nothing. The house will be sold to pay off as much of your joint debt as possible. What remains, you, Daniel, will be responsible for. You will declare bankruptcy if you must. You will face the consequences of your choices. I will give you one, and only one, piece of assistance. I will pay for an apartment for you, a small one, for 1 year. And I will pay for 2 things, a certified financial planner and a therapist. You will see both, weekly. You will learn how to manage money, and you will learn how to be a man. You will get a job. A real job, not a fantasy startup. It doesn't matter what it is. You will work, you will pay your debts, and you will learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet. I paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle. And Lily? Daniel finally whispered, his voice hoarse. Lily will live here, with me. I will petition for temporary, and then permanent, custody. You will have supervised visitation rights. If, and only if, you do everything I have just said, if you prove over time that you are stable, responsible, and worthy of being her father, then we can revisit that arrangement. But you will earn back your right to be in her life, inch by painful inch. Do you understand? Daniel nodded slowly, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat. He looked like a hollowed-out version of himself. Amelia, however, was not defeated. She was cornered. And what about me? She demanded, her voice shaking with rage. What do I get? I finally turned my full attention to her. I looked at her beautiful, enraged face, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a vast, cold emptiness. You get to walk out that door a free woman, I said. You get to not go to jail for conspiracy and attempted assault. That is what you get. You will sign the papers Daniel's lawyer prepares, you will take what personal belongings you can fit in your car, and you will disappear. If you ever try to contact me or Lily again, in any way, I will release the complete contents of that folder, and the audio recording, to the district attorney. Your freedom is contingent on your silence and your absence. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She was looking for a weakness, a crack in my resolve. She found none. With a strangled cry of pure frustration, she turned and stormed out of the room. A moment later, we heard the front door slam shut with enough force to rattle the windows. Daniel didn't move. He just sat there, the sobs now silent, tears tracking paths through the ashes of his life. I felt a pang of something, not love, not pity, but the ghost of a maternal instinct, the memory of the boy he once was. But I crushed it. Sentiment was a luxury I could no longer afford. Go home, Daniel, I said, my voice flat. Call a lawyer. Start your new life. He finally looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. Mom. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. And it was the coldest, most unforgiving truth I had ever spoken. Now go. 6 months felt like a lifetime. The grand silence that had once filled my house was different now. It was no longer the echoing quiet of a solitary life, but the peaceful hush of a sanctuary. It was punctuated by new sounds, the light patter of Lily's feet on the hardwood floors, her laughter chasing the sunbeams that streamed through the windows, the soft murmur of my voice reading to her before bed. The divorce was as quiet and brutal as I had demanded. Amelia, faced with the undeniable evidence and the threat of prosecution, signed everything. She vanished from our lives as completely as a stone dropped into a deep well. There was a ripple, and then nothing. I sometimes wondered where she went, what new life she was attempting to construct from the wreckage of the old one, but the thought was fleeting, like trying to recall the details of a bad dream. She was a ghost, and I refused to let her haunt my house. Daniel was adrift, but he was, for the first time in his adult life, treading his own water. He lived in a small, characterless apartment across town. He sold the Mercedes and drove a modest sedan. He worked as a project manager for a construction firm, a job I had no hand in getting for him. It was humbling, difficult work, and it was exactly what he needed. He saw his therapist and his financial planner. He was slowly, painstakingly, paying off the mountain of debt he had accumulated. He saw Lily every Sunday for 4 hours, at a public park halfway between our homes. At first, the visits were awkward, supervised from a distance by me. He was a stranger to his own daughter, a man diminished by his own choices. But slowly, a change began to occur. Without Amelia's influence, without the constant pressure to live a life he couldn't afford, something of the old Daniel, the kind, gentle boy I remembered, began to surface. He didn't try to impress Lily with expensive toys. He taught her how to skip stones. He pushed her on the swings. He listened. And Lily, with the boundless grace of a child, began to forgive him. I saw it in the way she started running to his car when he arrived, in the way she chattered excitedly about their afternoons together. He was earning his place back, inch by inch, just as I'd said he must. My own life had been upended. My quiet, orderly retirement was a distant memory. I was now a full-time guardian, a role I hadn't played in 40 years. I was navigating school pickups, parent-teacher conferences, and the baffling world of 9-year-old friendships. It was exhausting. It was chaotic. And I had never felt a deeper sense of purpose. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lily came home from school with a small, splintered block of wood. It was from a craft project that had gone wrong. She was frustrated, on the verge of tears. "I can't make it smooth, Grandma," she said, her lower lip trembling. "It's all rough." I looked at the sad little block of pine in her hand. And then I looked at her. An idea, one that had been dormant for years, began to stir. "I know a place where we can fix that," I said. I led her out of the main house, across the lawn to the converted garage. My workshop. I hadn't spent any real time in here for months, and the air was still and thick with the ghosts of old projects. I unlocked the heavy door and pushed it open. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating dancing motes of ancient sawdust. The smell hit me first, that glorious, earthy perfume of cedar, oak, and turpentine. The scent of my own creation. "What is this place?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the racks of tools, the stacks of lumber, the half-finished chair sitting under a dusty canvas sheet. "This," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name, "is where it all began. This is where I learned to make things that last." I picked up a piece of fine-grit sandpaper and handed it to her, showing her how to hold the block of wood, how to follow the grain, how to feel with her fingertips when the surface was becoming smooth. Her frustration melted away, replaced by a quiet, intense focus. We spent the rest of the afternoon in there. I showed her the different chisels, explaining how each one had a different voice, a different purpose. I let her turn the handle on the old wood vise, her small face screwed up with effort. I took a piece of scrap cherry wood and, with a few deft cuts of a handsaw, carved it into a rough approximation of a bird. She watched, mesmerized, as the shape emerged from the block, as if it had been hiding in there all along. In that dusty, sunlit workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the scent of my past, I understood something. The $23 million wasn't my true legacy. It was just money. It was a catalyst, a thing that had revealed the cracks in my family and nearly destroyed it. My real legacy was this, the knowledge in my hands. The strength to take something raw and unruly and shape it into something of beauty and purpose. The resilience to know that even when things are splintered and rough, they can be made smooth again with patience and hard work. This was what I could give Lily. Not a trust fund that could be squandered, but a skill. Not the keys to an empire, but the tools to build her own. I watched her, her small head bent over the block of wood, her tongue sticking out from the corner of her mouth in concentration. Her retirement party felt like a scene from someone else's life. My new life was here, in the scent of sawdust, in the rasp of sandpaper on wood, in the bright, curious eyes of my granddaughter. My pension had ended before it ever began. And I had never been happier.